want to tell you the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I was living in West Virginia. It was the summer of my junior year. Our friend Jake was turning 18, so we obviously were going to have a party. We decided to go camping. I end up bringing a big-ass tent. It's me, my friend Spencer, Jake, Sam, and Shane. We pick out a place that's not far from Spencer's place, deep enough in the woods that going back to the house is damn near impossible in the dark. And before I continue, there's a little bit of backstory here. So there's this friend of ours who we used to hang out with, but we kind of just let go of him, and he's basically been fading out from our group. His ego was bloated. He never does anything, and he's never contributed weed. And he will sometimes hinder our adventures, as a result of his people catching him with weed one too many times. And yes, we're all pretty big stoners. So we go out to Spencer's quite a bit as he lives about half an hour out of town, and his parents don't really care, which basically means that we can do whatever we want out there. Mostly we just have a couple of joints and play video games. The place that Spencer lives in is very, very small wooded area, known locally as 10 Mile and Shore, and it has its own share of spooky stories, including a satanic church about a mile away from Spencer's place. One that was often brought up was something called the Big White Ding. They say it's a 9 foot tall and white, sort of like a Sasquatch-type creature that was actually blamed for a few strange incidents. This member, Deer. However, we always knew it was an urban legend. Also, on a side note, well, I have read my fair share of stories throughout the years, especially of the Goldman type. But anyways, back to the actual story. It was about 8 p.m. when we got out of our stuff to the campsite. Spencer and Jake get a fire going as Sam and Shane bring supplies back and forth from the entry into the woods. I began to set up the tent. I should have started when we had more daylight, but stoners. We just waste time laughing at one another and doing dumb stuff. So right as I began putting up a 9-person tent, our friend Corey shows up. It turns out that he walked 9 miles of road to get here. He wasn't invited, and we're not sure how he found out. Let's help him get his lazy ass over here and help out. He tries to, of course, but he's too tired, he says, to do much of anything. So then I'm like, fuck it. I'll go Bear Grylls on this, and I decided to set it up myself. As the sun falls, Spencer gets the call that more weed is on its way. Spencer, Jake, Sam, and Shane all go leave to get it, leaving me here with fat-ass Corey. His phone happens to have a bright-ass flashlight, though, so I'm not going to complain too much. So we're alone. It's about 9 o'clock, and it's pitch black without the light, and then something starts to happen. So about 20 minutes in, his phone just randomly dies even though he claimed to have a full charge. So now here I am, pitching a big-ass 10 inches the dark with no one here to keep me company except for Mantis McGee. I then sort of hear sticks break around the clearing. It sounded like they were coming back with the weed. Every time I stop and go, Spencer. Then I'll listen a few minutes, but I get no response. Then I go back to the tent. That's when I start to notice a dead smell. I figure it might be dead fish that washed up on the edge of a nearby lake and then goes away after a few minutes, so I'll stop worrying about it. Around 1030, I finally get the tent set up. I throw all my stuff in there and lie down, hoping that they're back soon enough. Every few minutes, we start to hear what sounds like the group coming back. It's nothing. The smell comes back 5 minutes after we get in the tent. I assume it's just a musty-ass tent. It was in my basement after all. Then I start to feel real uneasy. I then play some music on my iPod. It does help me calm down for a bit. I close the 10th door because I just don't really feel safe at this point. And then, about 30 fucking minutes later, they finally show up. I have no idea what took them so long, but I felt relieved. We smoke a joint, we get high for a few hours, and everything is fine. The possibility of some kind of creature or a gold man is on my mind at this point, but I keep telling myself it's just from the internet, and it's not real. So about 2.3 inches the morning rolls around. We're all outside the tent. We're roasting chicken dogs around a pretty good fire. The smell is kind of gone, but maybe I'm just used to it now. I go take a piss like 30 or 40 feet from the group, facing the pitch-black darkness of the woods. I start to flip in my head for some reason. All of a sudden, I see something. Sort of like that scene in Science where the alien walked past the birthday party. It's basically just a flash of white, but it's so bright in contrast to everything else that I sort of make out a human figure. walking behind 2 bushes. This is too much for me. I sit my fly and book it back to camp, then start to laugh pretty awkwardly, telling my friends that I saw the big white thing. We all have a laugh. The smell is now overwhelming to me. But it seems like I'm the one who's noticing this and just pretend that everything's normal, though I've been scared out of my wits and out of my high at this point. Everyone's just chilling, but I keep hearing sticks breaking, and so I'm just always watching my back. It's now around 4 a.m. Jake, Spencer, and Corey have crashed. On the other hand, me, Sam, and Shane are all still up. They always stay up this late on weekends. But for me, I happen to stay up because I'm scared as hell. We sit around and sneak 1 or 2 tiny bowls while the other guys sleep, but it doesn't do anything to me. The smell at this point has honestly stopped bothering me. I just feel really creeped out. Sam and Shane are completely oblivious. Suddenly, I have to pee again. Shane does too, so he goes with me. And we go back to back about 15 feet from one another. I feel a little bit more confident that I'm safe. Time passes, the fire starts to burn away. It's time for more firewood. We all then spread out around the campground. I'm still scared, but I want to come back empty-handed. Suddenly, I noticed a different smell, kind of like sweat, but really old. I then start picking up wood quickly. I just think about heading back now. All of a sudden, yo Spencer, I freeze. I started looking all around me. It's pitch black out there. I can barely see 5 feet in front of me, and it's all woods anyways. I then say, no, it's me, figuring that Sam or Shane thought that I was Spencer for some reason. When I do say that, I'm met by dead silence. No crickets, no wind, no leaves or sticks moving. It sounds like a soundproof room. And then, right in my ear, I hear, yo Spencer. I turn that fucking bucket back to camp. I start screaming and trying to wake everybody up and get everyone in the group. We all get in the tent and sip it up. Everyone else is kind of pissed at me because I freaked them out. I tell them that I heard somebody talking to me out in the woods. I tell them that it sounded just like my voice. I then start explaining how I've been feeling the whole night. They all just look at me crazy, and Shane get back out of the tent. Everyone else just goes back to sleep. Fuck. I get in my sleeping bag, but there's no way I'm sleeping. But after about half an hour, starting to feel really tired, it's around 5. I remember checking my phone. I've been fading in and out for about 15 minutes. After regaining total consciousness, I notice that I only hear woods. There's no fire, and Sam and Shane are not talking. Not 5 minutes later, Shane walks into the tent. He stands up in the tent for a bit. I him just to lie down and go to sleep. I sort of whisper it, but he does lie down. I go back to drifting away. About 10 minutes later, I hear boots running. Sam practically dives into the tent, but he doesn't wake anybody up. Even Shane is fast asleep. Sam then begins whispering to me. He tells me that he heard somebody talking as well. He tells me that it begins to mimic them. Point out that Shane got here quite a while ago and wasn't freaking out. He goes cold. I look over and Shane is sleeping like a baby. Sound then just lies down, not saying anything. I end up falling asleep. The rest of the night was calm. I wake up the next morning. Everything would appear to be fine. Me, Jake, and Spencer are the first ones out of our tent. It was around 7.3. I actually feel quite refreshed for some reason. Like I just took the perfect power now. We all smoked a cigarette. I told them about the freaky stuff last night too. They revealed that they smelled everything as well. Jake said it was most likely a dead animal out in the woods. Spencer said it was most likely Corey's sweaty ass. After a cigarette, we wake up Sam and Shane for a wake and bake. I pull Shane aside and ask for a cigarette, and then I pull him aside again, Perger from the group, and I ask him if he had a rough night as well. He's like, yeah, I did. That him and Sam heard some real freaky stuff out in the woods. He thought it was me trying to catch up with them. Then they said they saw something running through the woods. They ran back to the campsite. He then says that he got split up with Sam and didn't find a camp until an hour ago. He said that when he got to the tent, everyone was sleeping, so he just laid down. I told him that I was awake when he got into the tent and that I said something to him. He said he doesn't remember any of that, that when he got there, the tent door was open and everyone was asleep, but he said he was also in a real shady mental state. So might be possible that he got things mixed up. The rest of the day was fine, but I didn't sleep for the next week. There's woods like this all around my neighborhood. I haven't been in them since all of this happened. Growing up on the rest, we always heard stories. People warning us about things we shouldn't mess with. Spirits, skinwalkers, curses, things that follow you if you're not careful. As kids, we laughed about it, thinking that they were just stories to scare us. And that's how I grew up, until something happened. But I'll get to that part later on in the story. When I was younger, I couldn't wait to leave, and when I finally left, I didn't think twice about it. My wife grew up traditional, the same as me actually, not really believing in these type of things. So we wanted to start somewhere new, and so we traded everything for a city life. Not exactly the city life, but you get the point. We moved away. What I'm about to tell you is real. It's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. You might not believe me, and I actually hope that you take this as entertainment even though you might think I'm crazy. But for those who do believe me, well, I hope if anything, it teaches all of us a lesson. I am going to warn you that if you're Catholic or a Christian, some parts are going to be a little bit disturbing or offensive, so please forgive me in advance. But I have to share everything with you so you can understand. It's a roller coaster. So me and my wife rented an apartment. After a few years, we were finally able to buy one. It was in very older, peaceful neighborhood, surrounded by big trees that gave it life, just very different from the rest. At least from the part that I grew up in. The streetlights were the old-fashioned ones, with a warm orange glow, which provided a little bit of light and often burned out. I want to mention that both of us have always loved dark and supernatural themes, and this home, well, this block, made it feel more like this. We loved it. I do want to point out that me and my wife were both now Catholic, at least what do you call it, practicing. But as the years went by, we stopped going to church and eventually we just stopped. I remember when everything started. It was a Friday night. It had rained most of the day. For a lot of people, Friday night means going out partying, staying up late, going out, hanging with friends, drinking. But for me, it means finally being able to relax after a week of work. I remember getting home that evening. I parked my car into the driveway. I walked towards the front door. I looked up at the sky. Dark clouds and some drizzle and wind and thunder was telling me that a storm was coming. Looking back, I just knew something was going to happen. There was nothing obvious, no reason for the uneasy feeling twisting in my gut, but it was there. The house looked the same as always, warm lights coming through the windows. I caught myself stopping at the door, fingers resting on the handle for a second longer than always. What's this feeling? What was this? I remember something feels different. Maybe it was the silence. Normally, I would hear my wife moving around inside, the cat scratching at the door, waiting to greet me. But tonight, it just felt different. I shook off the feeling, telling myself I was just tired. That was the first mistake. I walked through the door and my wife greeted me with a kiss, even though she wasn't as excited as other days. I guess because she felt my clothes wet, so I went over to take a shower, and after that we had dinner. It was the perfect night, the start of the weekend, watching scary movies with my wife and having the cliché background of thunder, lightning, and rain. Our cats also had their dinner. They seemed so relaxed by the sound of the rain that they fell asleep, not running around as they normally do. After dinner, we decided to go to the balcony to watch the rain and just enjoy the beauty. Since it was covered, we didn't have to worry about the rain hitting us. At this point, the storm was at its strongest. The rain pouring and the sky being filled with lightning. One lightning was so strong it brought light to the whole street for a quick second. And almost 2 seconds later, a thunder sound caused by a lightning strike was so strong that it made all the windows in the house vibrate. It seemed like it had shaken all the houses around, and in that moment, everything went dark. The power went out and the rain got stronger to the point where we couldn't see the houses across the street. The water that was falling became so dense that it seemed like there was nothing behind it. We decided to stay out there as there was no point in going back in since it was pitch black. Plus, the lights had gone out in the past a few times, but they always came back in about 30 minutes or so. Well, we stayed out for about an hour, all cozy with each other. Suddenly, the time we heard something, I swear, we heard what sounded like the door to the house open, as if someone had came inside. We looked at each other until my wife asked me to go check what happened, then told her for both of us to go just to be on the safe side. So we grabbed our phones and turned on the flashlights to go look. At first, we thought that somehow it had been the cats, but we knew that couldn't be it. It couldn't open the door. We did go around the house looking for anything that could have caused that noise, but we didn't find anything. We looked everywhere, but we saw nothing. We returned to the balcony to try to calm down and wait for the lights to come back on. Well, to be honest, we love the supernatural, scary movies and everything, but there is still a little bit of fear one can get no matter how much you claim to love it. I say this because the darkness outside felt less scary than the darkness inside. After about another hour, the lights still hadn't come on, so we decided to go to bed like that, trying to forget about what we heard. As we fell asleep, something woke me up throughout the night. Not sure what it was, but I lay there in bed looking up. I could still hear light rain outside, and I could tell that the light still hadn't came back on. But that's when I heard it. The sound that I assume is what woke me up from downstairs. It sounded like someone was calling out to our cats or trying to get their attention. I tried hearing more, and it definitely sounded like talking and then a giggle. So I figured it was my wife. So I just turned over to go back to sleep. But as I did, my heart stopped. I felt her next to me. I felt my stomach drop. My mouth went dry, and I was completely paralyzed for a moment because I kept hearing it, followed by a muffled laugh, almost like if someone was covering their mouth to avoid laughing. After thinking about it for a few minutes and no longer hearing any noises, I shook my wife to wake her up, but she wouldn't wake up. She was like dead asleep. Oh, Hermeta, even though I no longer go to church, the only thing that I could think of was getting a rosary and the crucifix that we had stored in a box in the closet. We hadn't even planned on putting them anywhere, but a friend had given them to us saying they were blessed and for our protection. After thinking about it for a few minutes and no longer hearing anything, I quickly got up and went to the closet and got the crucifix that was given to us. Now, call me stupid, but what if it was an intruder? What was I supposed to do? To be honest, I should have gotten a gun, but we didn't own any at that time. So I took my phone and turned on the flashlight, and then I went to the stairs to see who was down there. Before going down the stairs, I yelled out, "Who's down there?" And then I said, "I already called the police and they're on their way." Of course I hadn't called them. That didn't even cross my head. Right now my mind was focused on protecting our home. There was no response, so I slowly went down the stairs and looked around before getting to the last step. I mean, it was completely pitch black inside. The only thing I could see was what the light of my phone gave out. As I started walking around the first floor, I didn't see or hear anything except for my cat standing in place, looking suspicious. At this point, I've seen too many scary movies, and I'm starting to think, what if my cats are something else? Those thoughts came to my head, but I ignored them. I stayed looking everywhere, in every kitchen cabinet, and even went outside. It had already stopped raining, but it was very silent, eerie-like, but I felt safer outside and inside the house, which was weird. I'm not sure what it was, but I decided to come back inside. As I came back in, using the light of my phone, I noticed the cats were looking at the stairs, and one of them started growling. I took out the crucifix, and I started to remember the prayers that I learned at church. As I got closer to the stairs to go back up to our room, the cat started growling like crazy, looking at the top of the stairs. As I got to them, I looked up to see what they were growling at. When I did, a figure coming down the stairs. By this point, my eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could see better now. Also, this is what I mean by when I say that I really hope you think all of this is fake. Shit, I wish it was, but I hope you take it as entertainment. I saw the most horrifying thing to this day that I have ever seen. An image. This image that I can't get out of my head to this day. Everywhere that I look, I see it. Coming down the stairs with long steps was a completely naked man, covered blood, with a crown of thorns, paralyzed, feeling like I was going to pass out. It looked like a man. It almost appeared to be like a Christ figure. I thought I recognized different pictures that This figure stopped a few feet from me in the darkness. I was afraid to look at it, and then moved its head to the left, then to the right, and then back to the center. "Are you praying to me?" And it let out what sounded like a small chuckle. It spoke low and continued, "Come, my child, don't be afraid. I am the Lamb of God. Put your hand in my side and believe." I know it wasn't human, as it said those last words. I saw it put its hand into a wound on its side and twist it, then put its left hand over its mouth, revealing a long dark tongue moving up and down before letting out an evil laugh, and said, "Your prayers cannot help you. He does not exist, but I do." Suddenly the cat started going crazy. This creature, ding, whatever it was in the darkness, turned to them and growled back. That was the last thing I remember. My wife told me that when she heard the cats, she woke up and noticed that I wasn't in bed. She called out to me but got no response. So she got up, tried to turn on the light, but the power was still out. She then saw a light in the hallway. It was my phone illuminating the floor. She got scared when she saw me lying on the ground and tried to wake me, thinking that I had fallen or tripped or something. She checked for injuries and felt relieved when she saw there were none. She was about to call for help when she heard a voice that she recognized. "Go back to sleep. He'll be fine," the voice said. At first she thought she was still half asleep and imagining things, but then she heard it again. "He's fine. He'll wake up in a few." My wife said it was the voice of my dad. She felt like she was going into shock and out of desperation. She started to shake me to wake me up. The cat started making noises and she turned to see a dark figure crawling, coming from the kitchen. She said the figure sat beside me, and my wife said she could barely see it next to me due to the light from the phone. "I told you, he's fine," the voice said. That's when she recognized the silhouette that matched the voice that she just heard. It was the voice of my dad. She said she started seeing this thing more clear as it was beside me. My wife said at this thing, it was sort of looking like my dad, and it started to move strange. It grabbed its jaw with one hand and its forehead with the other, making chewing motions. Slow, then fast, then it extended its hand and said, "Come, leave them. Let's have some fun," before letting out a short laugh. My wife then said she'd try to pray, but the sting took a few steps towards her, crawling. Then it sat up on the floor, crossing its legs, resting its elbows on its knees and its head in its hands. It was so close that my wife could see it smiling. "Now, let's pray together for him to the man on the cross," it said. My wife began to cry because she was scared and didn't know what to do. So she closed her eyes tightly and screamed when she felt something lunging at her. But it was Julian, one of our cats, who started growling. She then said that she kept hearing someone laughing around her, but she didn't want to open her eyes. She sat there holding Julian for what felt like hours with her eyes closed until she finally fell asleep or blacked out or something. All I noticed that when I woke up, I felt weak, dizzy, confused, not knowing where I was, almost like if I had slept for days. I saw my wife laying down at my feet, still asleep, with Julie and beside her. I woke her up and she looked at me for a moment before just hugging me. Keep in mind that we both had no idea what we experienced just hours before, because apparently I was knocked out and I had no idea what my wife had gone through. At this point the power was back on and we saw the light in the bedroom was also on. We both got up and asked her what happened and why she was crying. She told me it was nothing, that she had gone to the bathroom and found me laying down on the floor. She tried to wake me up, and when she saw I wasn't responding, she thought something had happened. It was nothing to worry about. I doubted her story because I was starting to remember bits and pieces of what I had experienced at the stairs. I told her what I remember, and then she shared what she had experienced as well. For a long time, we just sat in silence, both of us trying to make sense of what happened. Even explain something like this. We tried convincing ourselves that maybe we were just half asleep, that maybe stress was getting to us, but we both knew something was going on. Still, we tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just our minds playing tricks on us. Maybe it was all the scary movies and scary stories we consume daily, bleeding into the real life, making us see things that weren't really there. After all, isn't that what happens when you fill your head with too much of this stuff? You start hearing noises and seeing shadows. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe we just had nightmares. But what were the chances that we both saw the same thing or dreamed the same thing? We didn't know what to do. My wife suggested we try to ignore it, and maybe whatever it was would stop if we didn't give it attention. And that's exactly what we did. And there was a bit of hope because for a few days nothing happened. As a matter of fact, for the next few weeks nothing happened. The first few nights were scary, but after that we both just forgot about it, and we also refused to talk about it. However, on another Friday night, similar to the first time, something way worse happened. I woke up to a light pain, like something had bit me on my heel. At first I thought it was one of my cats, but when I was able to wake up, I heard a voice from the foot of my bed saying, "My son, do not fear. Do you not want to eat my body? Do you want to drink my blood?" When I heard those words, something licked the sole of my foot and said, "Consume my body, and I will consume yours." I felt this horrible feeling in my stomach and I was paralyzed. I couldn't make a sound. I closed my eyes tightly and tried to think of something else to imagine myself far away, but I couldn't. Then, I heard a second voice. My little one, come, Mommy's going to take care of you. As I said those words, I pressed my eyes shut to avoid opening them. And that's when I felt something grab my hand and place it on its face. I felt my heart beating so fast that I thought I was going to die, especially when I felt with my hand something like a pile of warm raw meat. That's when I remembered to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done. I then heard the voice laughing. It then said in a strong, mocking voice, your prayers can't help you. He does not exist, but I do. Your kingdom come, your will be done. I couldn't continue. I assumed this thing could hear my thoughts and knew the type of fear that I had. I tried to scream without even opening my eyes, and after a few seconds, that desperate scream finally came out of my throat. Instantly, my wife woke up and asked me what was happening, still not wanting to open my eyes. I asked if it was really her, and she said yes. Who else would it be? She then asked if I was okay. I said no, and that this thing was here again, that it was starting to talk to me. She asked who, even though she already knew the answer. I told her it was that thing again, that it was here in the room with us. She then turned on the light and said there was no one there. And that's when I finally opened my eyes. Sure enough, it was just the two of us. I told her what just happened and what we couldn't sleep anymore. We turned on the TV and watched it until dawn. That was enough for me until we made a few phone calls. We hadn't been to Mass in a long time, but we still knew a priest from our old church. I didn't want to call, feeling almost ashamed to ask for help. We didn't have a choice. For the next few days, nothing happened, and then a priest came by to bless the house. He sprinkled some holy water everywhere and he said a few prayers. As we had already told him roughly what was happening, and even though we weren't going to church no more, he decided to leave a big crucifix and a picture of the Virgin Mary. He placed them in the living room, said a few prayers, and then left. But it was useless. Later that day, not even at night, hours later, they were both on the ground. At this point, we were desperate. Remember how I told you we were into supernatural and scary stuff? It just movies and books. We were deep into online horror communities too. We had joined a few Facebook groups for collectors and paranormal investigations and some pop-up events in our city. It was mostly for fun, but I figured if anyone had advice on what we were dealing with, it would be somebody in this group. So I made a post. I didn't go too much into detail. I just said a quick summary of what happened and that we had already tried a priest. I figured that people were just going to joke around or tell me it was all in my head. But there was somebody who said, "There's a witch doctor in your city. She deals with things like this. If the priest couldn't help, she might be your best shot." Normally I would scroll past something like that, but at this point, what else could we do? I clicked the profile of the person who left the comment. They had been active in this group for some time, so I know it wasn't some random troll. So I sent her a message and she sent me the contact information. Well, actually, she sent me the link to her profile. It was a witch doctor who apparently knew how to get rid of evil spirits and bad things. She messaged back saying that she was overseas and wouldn't be back for a few months. I felt a pit in my stomach when she said that. We needed help. Still, she didn't just brush us off. She started asking a few questions, things I hadn't even considered. Did anything change in your home before this started? Did you bring anything new inside? Think carefully. Was anything given to you recently? We had moved into this house some time now. We had bought everything. Decorations, couches, random things here and there. But nothing stood out. My wife did mention the crucifix and the Virgin Mary picture that the priest had left. But the witch doctor quickly said, "That's not it. Think about something that's in your home that wasn't there before." I did tell her that we got rid of a few things that we had thrown, some things that felt strange. But she warned us sometimes when something is invited in, it stays even after throwing the item away. If you want this to go away, start looking around. Really start looking, she told us. And remember, not everything, as reflection of itself. She didn't know nothing about us, but she sounded like she knew what she was doing. I told her thanks, but I couldn't think of anything. The next morning, exhausted, I received a phone call from my dad, just random. He never calls. We had a good conversation and catching up, and I remember wanting to tell him about everything that was going on. But before we clicked, he said, "Hey son, there's anything going on, I'm just a phone call away." That's when I spilled the beans and told him everything that was going on. At first he just listened. He stayed quiet. Then he said, "You should have told me sooner. I knew it. I'll send someone. A medicine man will come in a few days. He'll know what to do." For the first time in a while, we felt relieved. Like maybe, finally, there was an answer. Again, a few days passed and nothing happened. When the medicine man arrived from the Red Ass, he didn't waste time with small talk. He walked into our house with his eyes moving over everything, almost like he was seeing things that we couldn't. Without saying much, he pulled out some cedar and sage, lighting them and letting the smoke drift through the rooms. He walked slowly, saying prayers under his breath. Then, as he was walking, he went through each room. When he stepped into the hallway, he stopped. And before I could ask him anything, he turned to us and said, "Where did you get that?" I followed his gaze. He was staring at his reflection, at the mirror that we had. It had been sitting there for a while, blending in with the rest of our things. But the way he looked at it, it just made my skin crawl. "Where did you get this from?" he repeated, his voice firm. The store." Not even trying to be funny, but that's where we bought it from. His face didn't change. He then stepped closer to it. The smoke from the smudge stick started curling towards the glass. At first, nothing happened, but then the smoke stopped moving. Didn't rise, it didn't swirl, it just hung there. The medicine man took a step back, gripping the bundle of sage. "You need to get rid of this." When he said this, I was shocked. Not even shocked, more like just surprised. Before I could even answer, he said, "Now, you need to get rid of this now." My wife and I didn't argue. I grabbed the mirror, pulled it off the wall. "Take it outside," the medicine man said. I carried it straight to the front door, walked down the driveway, and put it on the curbside. And yes, I went back inside, grabbed a few trash bags, went back out, double and triple bagged it, and left it out there. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it. Something about it felt wrong, almost like it was calling out to me, wanting me to pick it back up. I walked back inside, closing the door behind me, and for the first time in weeks, everything just felt better. That's when the medicine man said, "Now a cleansing must be done." We follow everything that he said. The house was cleansed. But I want you to understand something. It wasn't that the blessing from the priest didn't work. It wasn't that Catholicism had failed. The issue wasn't in our prayers or in the holy water or the crucifix. The issue was the mirror. It was still there, still in our house, until we finally let go of what was inviting this thing in. It was never going to leave. You see, it's not just about fate. It's about what we allow to stay in our lives. And if you let it in, it will stay. Now what about the mirror that we had? Even I knew the teachings of not to shop for used stuff, but this wasn't bought at some antique store or thrift store. But it clicked. I remember we got it at a special price, clearance, because someone had returned it. So maybe it was used. I mean, it was like new. So I guess we didn't know who had it in the past, why it was returned. A cursed object? Maybe. Now, I know what you might be thinking. See, the traditional ways are the true. Or maybe you're wondering if this proves that Catholicism doesn't work. But let me be clear. I'm not here to debate religion or to even convince you what to follow. That's not the point. Everyone has their journey that they're traveling through. All I know is that my dad and this Madison man, they knew what they were doing, and whatever was in our home, it left. Would it work with the priest if we had been closer to the church? Maybe. All I know is that this did work. And let's just say for now, me and my wife are starting to follow the old traditional ways. So I lived in Idaho my entire life, and I spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping, and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trail we could find just to get a view of the sunset. On one of these times, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite that I only know as Warm River. The river there never freezes over. I think that's why they call it that. My brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was this old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail. It was most likely an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something that I'll never forget. After walking about 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end that we had came in through. The screech wasn't like anything that I had ever heard before. I had heard the screams of animals at night. I think at some point I even heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never this metallic screech that I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it didn't sound natural in any way. I probably jumped about 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few curses before shoving me quickly towards the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided that we should just continue walking and head back after whatever had made that noise. We didn't have any guns on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me that it would be fine, and we made a walk back without any incident. However, didn't get any sleep that night, whether it was that noise that we heard or just my imagination. Also, it sounded like whispers. I woke up my brother a few times to check out what it was, but he refused to, telling me that it was most likely just other campers staying up late and having a good time. The rest of the trip was pretty normal, and my life continued on as normal. Looking back at this experience, I chalked up what happened as a harmless event that must have just been exaggerated. A few weeks later, I went to an old ski lodge that my family rented every year. I would hang out with my cousins there. Our favorite activities were night games, hide and seek, a game called Ghost in the Graveyard, and other games like that. In one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. I was one of the younger cousins, and I got a flashlight. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge, but the older ones would hide in the trees or at the base of a nearby mountain. As I was looking near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint to our locations. It sounded like somebody was hiding up near a tree that was known as the underwear tree. You can guess why. So I began trekking up to the whistle as I got closer. I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continue on and convince myself that I would be fine. I hated walking at night, especially alone, but I figured whoever I found would end up walking back with me to the lodge. Yeah, fucking right. Something definitely dead. As I neared the tree, I noticed it was very silent. This raised a flag that something was very wrong. At this point, I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott. I thought the whistle was my older cousin's. Come back down with me," I said, but I got no reply. I wasn't planning on waiting, so screw it. I began walking back down the path. That's when I heard a voice call. "You almost had me." So I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light into the branches of the tree, and that's when I saw a monstrosity that wasn't my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human. It had lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind. It had torn and stretching features. As soon as I was able to react, I fucking screamed. I dropped the flashlight and ran back to the lodge. The whole time that I ran, I was overcome by an overpowering smell, and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp, I saw a few people. My cousins at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking at this point, and they all took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said that they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and again, I kept hearing random sounds at night. I never fucking played night games after that happened, and I was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. And ever since that night, I have always felt uneasy being outdoors at night. I used to be really religious, and I figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that. But that place has never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago, the game Until Dawn became really popular, and I saw a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in the game, I got chills down my spine. It's exactly what I fucking saw, and did a ton of research on them. I figured that somebody must have gotten snowed in at that place at some point and resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warren River. I still hear that screech here and there, and it's never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and that just scares the hell out of me. I heard the same screech when I was up there last time, and that's why I decided to tell my story. Back in the 90s, I used to work for a social services organization on the res. We would go out to homes for adults that have disabilities or just need elderly care, and a lot of scary, creepy, crazy shit went down. I'm not going to mention names, locations, or even dates, because confidential. Sometimes some of the patients would wake up in the middle of the night, and you'll find them in the hall, kitchen, or somewhere randomly just staring at you without saying anything. Others would simply talk to the room, like to the wall in the corners, like somebody was standing there. Sometimes they would say something that just sounded creepy to the point where sometimes you thought they were trying to prank you. Anyways, after working around them for a bit, you start getting used to it. You get to know them, and a lot of them just need somebody to talk to. And you can learn a lot from them as well. Some of them will tell you the same stories over and over again about their families, their childhood, about when they were kids or things they remember from years ago. So this one time I worked at a home from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I was caring for 2 ladies and 1 older lady. The older lady was about 70. She would never sleep, or she always had a hard time sleeping. I would always hear her talking to somebody in the middle of the night. On some nights she would start screaming at me, saying that there was somebody in the room with her. This would happen at least once a week. Now sometimes I would hear things in the kitchen or in other places of the apartment. I'm not sure if the apartment was haunted or if it had something to do with her personally. Never bothered me or the other 2 patients. It got to the point where I would always pray before walking in, and after I would leave. I don't work there anymore, and I do think about that lady. I'm pretty sure something definitely was going on. There's so many stories like this that I could tell you, so many of them. This doesn't compare to what happened in other cases, simply because I refuse to even speak about certain things. But I'll tell you about one that made me stop working overnight. I was at this other facility that I worked at. It was in a facility. It was just a normal trailer home with sometimes 2 to 3 patients living there, and the caregiver was also living there. Now, how I ended up there was because the caregiver didn't want to live there 24/7. So our supervisor ended up sending me to stay there overnight. This way, the caregiver during the day didn't have to sleep there or live there. She always had special privileges. Out of all of us, she was always the one to get her way. I'm sure there was something going on with her and our supervisor, but hey, none of my business. The pay wasn't the best, and the work can be tough, stressful. Well, sometimes that is. I guess it all depends if you can handle taking care of other people, especially at night. At this point, I wasn't certified yet to be working around them. But hey, it's the rest. I was going to tell you something right. This was back in the 90s. So the house, or quote-unquote, facility I was working at only had 2 patients, and it was a small 3-bedroom home. I had a room with 1 window. There was also a ramp that ran right by the window. One night, around 10 p.m., I was sitting at the little desk in the room that they had set aside for staff, filling out paperwork and the nightly logs they make you do. I had the lamp on and the house was quiet. The 2 patients were asleep. I could tell because there wasn't any noise going on. Out of nowhere, I heard several loud tapping sounds on the window. I just sat there for a second listening. Then I got up and turned the lamp off, thinking that maybe somebody was outside, and if there was, they could definitely see inside. For sure I wasn't going out there. And after a few minutes, I didn't hear anything. I went back and sat down. Then the tapping sound came again. When I looked up, I could see shadows moving across the opposite wall from the window. I saw what looked like long dog-like ears sticking up in the shadow. I freaked out. I started praying. In the middle of all this, I started hearing footsteps. Whoever or whatever this was now on the roof. I didn't do anything, but I just started praying till the sunrise. By the time that morning came, I was ready to get the fuck out of there. Completely freaked out. I was just waiting for the other worker to get there. As I was waiting, I heard when one of the patients started ringing a bell. I went to go check on her. When I walked into the room, she was sitting up and just staring out the window. I remember checking on her to see what was needed or what was going on, but she didn't say anything. She just kept staring at the window, and she was like, "It came last night to who you are." I was like, "Who?" And she responded with, "The one who walks on the roof." And she didn't say anything else. When my coworker got there about an hour later, I told her everything that happened and what the patient told me. She just looked at me and was like, "That's nothing. You'll get used to it. They come around every night." What the fuck? I requested to be transferred after that because fuck that. You can get used to it. But that's something I don't ever want to get used to. And the following days until I was transferred, I made sure I had my medicine bundle and cedar with me. Last night was by far the most terrifying night of my life. I'm questioning my own sanity. Was I dreaming? No, it actually happened. I know it did. I haven't even been back to sleep, so I know I wasn't dreaming. I'll explain what happened as best as I can. I'm typing this on my phone, so please excuse any mistakes. Last night, I was watching the movie with my girlfriend Amy when her phone rang. She let out a sigh of frustration as she looked at the caller ID and saw that it was her boss calling. She's a nurse at the local hospital, and it's her weekend to be on call. So ignoring the call is not an option. Sorry, babe. I have to go. Sounds like I won't be back for a few hours, so I'll just see you in the morning, I guess. She said with a frown after hanging up the phone. Sorry about that, love, I said as I stood up to give her a hug, and said goodbye. She grabbed her keys in person and headed out. On the weekends that she's on call, she has her uniform and has her bag ready. That way she can get to the hospital quickly. Never know if the situation will be urgent. I looked at the clock and noticed it was 8 p.m. I stopped my movie and started to get around for bed. I know, 8 o'clock is early for bed, but I wake up at 4 in the morning for work every day. That way I don't make it in very late. After my shower and nightly routine, it was 9 and I was more than tired. So I dragged my feet to bed and plopped under the blankets with a heavy sigh. I don't think I made it 5 minutes before I was out like a light. I was jolted awake to the sound of my bedroom door closing. Hey babe, how was work? I sat under my breath without even opening my eyes. She replied slowly. Her voice sounded really off, as if she were half awake and wasn't able to speak. I figured it was just really late, and she was exhausted. Next, I heard a dragging noise followed by a thump, as if she was dragging her feet across the floor. At this point, felt goosebumps slowly cover my whole body. Something didn't feel right, and I was starting to get spooked a little bit. I told myself I was just being paranoid and trying to calm myself down, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn over and look to see if it was just Amy. It's like my brain knew I wouldn't like what I saw, so it refused to look. After a couple of more seconds, the old footsteps stopped at the foot of my bed and just stood there. That's when I noticed the deep, wheezing breathing. It sounded like an 80-year-old smoker that just ran up a flight of stairs. At this point, I knew it wasn't Amy. My heart started pounding at the thought of someone breaking into my home and staring at me in bed. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the end of my bed started to sink down from pressure as this person started climbing to bed with me. At this point, I'm paralyzed in fear, unable to do anything except lay still as the bed started sinking. The bed has sunk in so far I had to force myself not to roll over and bump into this person that was next to me, whoever this was. Had to be fucking big to put that much pressure on the bed. I'm 6 feet tall, and I weigh about 205, and I don't even sink the bed down even half as much. What? The voice repeated slowly again right into my ear. Pins and needles ran down my spine as I had to fight back tears from being so scared. I never felt such an overwhelming feeling of dread and fear in my whole 30 years of life. Hot, putrid air hit the back of my neck as it started wheezing again. The smell was unbearable, and I had fight back the feeling of gagging. It smelled like rotting dead animal and eggs. I started breathing on my neck for what felt like hours, but it must have been only a few minutes. Finally, the rancid breathing stopped, and I felt like the pressure on the bed was letting up. But thankfully, it was getting out of my bed. After a few minutes, it was completely out of it, and it started shuffling slowly towards the door. I hadn't realized, but I was holding my breath the entire time, and my lungs were starting to burn. I tried to breathe as quietly as possible so I didn't give it away that I was still awake. However, as soon as I let out my breath, the footsteps stopped. I could hear a thing, not even the raspy breathing. The silence was terrifying. I didn't know if it was looking at me or what. I didn't move a muscle for at least 5 minutes until I finally decided to crack an eyelid open just to see if it was gone. I noticed the shape standing maybe 2 feet away from me, and it looked enormous. It was standing so I could only make out a giant, pale forearm and long, winky fingers covered in dirt. Judging by the hand size alone, this thing had to be over 7 feet tall. The figure's knees started popping loud as it started to crouch down, almost like to get level with my face. I slammed my eyes shut quickly so I didn't have to see what this thing's face looked like. I could sense it was face to face with me. I could feel it staring at me, waiting for me to open my eyes, to look at it. I kept my fucking eyes squeezed shut the whole time, not trying to find out what this thing looked like. Somehow, I felt like something horrible was going to happen. All of a sudden, I heard the front door close, and I heard Amy's keys jingle as she set them on the hook. My adrenaline shot up even more. As I imagine Amy walking into the bedroom and coming face to face with this thing, my instincts kicked in and I knew I had a protector. So I opened my eyes and jumped up as fast as I could, ready to face this thing. When I did, I looked around the room. I was shocked to find it completely empty once I realized it wasn't in here with me anymore. My heart sunk as I thought it must have went out of the room to go get Amy. I ran faster than I thought possible, screaming Amy's name to try to warn her. "What are you doing? Why is the front door wide open?" She looked startled as I came barreling down the hallway. "Somebody was just in our fucking house," I screamed at the top of my lungs. She looked at me with a confused look on her face before scanning the room. "Huh?" She looked at me like I was crazy. I explained to her exactly what happened, and I watched as the color drained from her face. We then went outside and called the police and told them someone broke into our home. An officer arrived at our house within 10 minutes. We stayed outside as they searched our whole house before coming back out and telling us the house was clear. The only thing they noticed was a pungent odor coming from my bedroom. The officer said he would be patrolling around my neighborhood for the next few nights, and if this person showed back up to call them right away, then they left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I jumped at every creak the house made, and now I'm fucking exhausted. I'm terrified to go to sleep now. What if this thing comes back? I say thing because I honestly don't think it was human. I didn't get a good look at it, but judging by what I did see, it didn't look like a human. My grandpa told me the following story. He said this happened back when he was just a kid, growing up on the White Earth Reservation back in the 1940s. Grandpa said that him and his younger brother and their mom all slept in the same bedroom inside a small one-room log house that happened to be near the tree line. The tree started not too far from their door. My grandpa said that one time in the middle of the night, he woke up for no reason at all. At least that's what he said. But when his eyes opened, it was completely quiet. There wasn't any noise anywhere, and he was just staring at the wall. He said it was so quiet that he could hear his mom, who never snoring, but most likely it was just her own breathing. He said that's when he heard shuffling sounds, kind of like footsteps. He turned around to face the bedroom. When he did, he saw somebody standing beside his brother's bed. It was a woman dressed completely in black. He said her face was pale, and she just stood there quietly, looking down at him. My grandpa got terrified and started trying to wake up his mom, shaking her shoulder and whispering that somebody was in the room, but she barely moved and brushed them off. She was most likely exhausted from long days of work and life itself in those times. Then the woman reached down and lifted his little brother out of the bed. My grandpa said that he was too scared to even move. He continued watching as she carried the boy across the room, opened the door, and left. He happened to look out the window and saw her going towards the woods. After a few minutes, he was finally able to wake his mother up. When she realized that the younger boy was gone, she panicked and ran outside, screaming for help. Soon, other people from the neighborhood came running out, and a bunch of them grabbed some lanterns and went into the woods to go look for him. My granddad went with them. He said they looked around for hours through the trees in the dark. Everyone kept calling the boy's name and looking around, but there was no sign of him or the woman. My grandpa said they didn't find his brother until they heard the first rooster crowing, which means that the morning was coming. Not long after that, they found him lying down in the brush not too far from the house. He was alive and he wasn't even seriously hurt, but his arms and chest and his back were covered in scratches. It seemed like he was being dragged through the woods. No one ever found the woman. My grandpa said for the next few weeks, everybody would start boarding up their homes. Nobody had an explanation for what happened. My grandpa did tell me that years down the road, he started asking his brother if he remembers this, and he said he had no idea what he was talking about. There were some farm fields in the back of our home, and behind those were some woods. As I was walking deep in the woods one time, I started to hear some awful cackling, laughter. It seemed to be coming from all directions at once, almost like the cackling was spinning around me. At this point, the woods had grown silent, except for the cackling. It started getting louder, and like I said, it seemed to be spinning around me. I felt like I was stuck standing there, and I couldn't get my legs to move. It all started when I was trying to enter a deeper part of the woods than I had ever previously gotten to. Mind you, it was full daylight. I'm not sure how long it lasted, But when it stopped, I fucking ran. I still don't know what it was, and I haven't came up with any ideas that aren't supernatural. It didn't sound like any native bird or animal that I'm aware of. To be quite honest, it sounded like an old man cackling and rasping for air, but with almost a sinister gleefulness behind it. Include the overpowering feeling of somebody watching you, especially because it felt like you were being watched from high in the treetops. Fight or flight response kicking in and out of the blue. I realized that some of these are most likely due to nearby coyotes or black bears out there, or just the general secluded nature of the area causing me to be paranoid. But that fucking cackling sound, I really can't explain. After this happened, I told my mom about it, and she told me not to go in there alone anymore. She said she was afraid that the woods would take me. This whole experience really freaked my mom out when I told her. She always never liked me going out there by myself. My parents always told me that Native Americans used to inhabit that area, and that would make sense given its location, history of the surrounding area, as well as having a good-sized stream and a large pond all within the woods. So my mother said it was some sort of supernatural spirit, possibly connected to the tribes that were there before. Who knows? I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I shouldn't have come. I knew I shouldn't have accepted the dare. I couldn't back down from a double dare. My name is Jacob, but my friends call me Jake. My friends had dared me to come here at midnight to prove that I wasn't a bitch. There was no way I could back down from a double dare. I had to, or else everyone would know that I was a coward. My friends and I were in the woods near our town, just messing around, teenager stuff. Our parents had always warned us to stay away from the woods, as anything could happen out there. Of course we didn't listen. We were 15 and we thought we knew better than them, as every teenager does. Our town's woods are like any other towns. Parents would warn us not to go in as children, leading us to create stories about creatures that live in the woods who only come out at night with the body of a deer and the torso of a man. We outgrew all of these childish creations and fantasies, often going in there to enjoy a sneaky smoke or to take our new girlfriend away from the prying eyes of their parents. So we had entered the woods at just about 4 p.m. It was autumn and the clouds were hanging low over the treetops, threatening with heavy rain that was expected for weeks now. My friends Sam and Archie, they were with me. Archie is my best friend. Ever since we met in 2nd grade, Sam, on the other hand, was a big dude, towering over us at 5'11", at just 15 years old. He was the guy you always wanted on your side when you got into a fight. Now me and Sam didn't get along very well. We had only met through a friend of a friend type of thing, and we had never really bonded well. Sam was doing his usual bragging about the stuff that he got into last night, with his girlfriend that we all knew were just over-exaggerated fantasies. We had just arrived at the clearing. That was the name. It was exactly that, a clearing in the woods with a large boulder in the center. As kids, whenever we walked through the woods with our parents, we would climb to the top and yell funny phrases from our favorite cartoons at the time. We walked over to where the boulder was at. The conversation turned towards movies. We all had recently seen a scary movie together, and we were all just making comments about how we saw each other flinch at certain scenes. Both Sammy and Archie were claiming that I was the only one who jumped the most, and of course, like any testosterone-driven team, I was on the physical defensive immediately, jokingly pushing Archie off the rock. They both talked about how I was always a chicken when watching scary movies, always jumping at every shadow after the movie too. One thing led to the other, and before I knew it, I had been there to prove that I wasn't the coward that they were claiming I was. To stay in the woods with them until midnight, and then they would leave me alone for an hour to see how long I would last in the dark woods on my own. I was hesitating to accept it, thinking of my parents and stuff, and it also being a school night, but then Archie double-dared me. He came to decline the double dare. I had to accept the challenge, so we hung around waiting for midnight to come. They continued their conversations, but I couldn't get involved. I was far too nervous, and dreading the moment that I would be left alone in these dark woods. They had promised me they wouldn't be too far off, and that they wouldn't be able to hear my girly screams if I got too scared and wanted out of it. It wasn't the dark that I was going to be scared of. It's what's unseen in the dark that scares me. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't stop my breathing rate as time went down to midnight. Just 10 minutes to go. 10 minutes, and then an hour standing in the pitch-black woods in the clearing, proving to my friends that I wasn't a coward. Was it worth it to live for the rest of my friendship with them being called the chicken, or to stand here through 60 minutes of dread. Damn it. I shouldn't have seen so many scary movies. I couldn't focus. I kept seeing things in the corner of my eye, shadows behind trees that moved out of sight when I turned my full attention on them. I knew it was all my imagination, though. Just that. My imagination. Archie's voice cut through the mist in my mind. A deer. I squinted through the darkness in the direction he was pointing. "You're gonna scare it away," Archie hissed. He gestured with his hand to the left side of the boulder, middle distance. And sure enough, there was a deer. It was standing still. Just very still. It was engraving the grass. It was looking around for any danger. It was just standing there, with its head pointed straight, looking east. Archie smiled at me. I nodded. My mouth still dry, but I was nervous. I pulled down my phone and checked the time to see how long I had before I was left alone in these woods. That's when Archie stopped me, grabbing my hand and shaking his head. "The light from the phone might scare it away," he whispered. Put the phone away and squinted through the darkness again at the still, motionless deer. We stood there for a few minutes just watching it. It hadn't moved once. "Yo," Sam was asking. That's when the deer moved. I saw it. Just as Sam had said those words, the deer turned its head to look at us. I felt a shiver go down my spine, not sure why. But the way it had turned its head to look at us didn't seem right. The movement itself wasn't fluid. It wasn't like the deer was afraid of the noise and it just whipped its own head around. The deer had turned its head too slowly. It was staring at us and we stared right back at it and nobody moved. The woods got quiet. It was almost like the trees and animals were all holding their breath. That's when it moved again. So slowly, unnaturally, it started to walk. I'm not even sure if walk is the right way to describe its movements. It was more like forced, as if its legs didn't belong to it, like if it was still trying to figure out how to use its limbs along the way. Jerky and slow movements, moving away into the darkness until the blackness surrounded it, and we could no longer see it. None of us said anything. That's when Sam turned to us. He ruined it. Of course he would. "All right, enough of that weird-ass deer. We're here for a reason, right?" I couldn't do anything but stare at him. A heart beating so fast in my chest and my head swimming with thoughts. Archie didn't respond. "Well," Sam demanded. Archie looked at me. I couldn't move. Fear had paralyzed me. I was scared of what I just saw, and the strangeness of it, and the fear of the dare itself. Archie then shrugged at me. He then checked the time, 12:03, a little over midnight. "Well," Archie began, but that's when sound cut in. "Let's get to it. It's bloody freezing out here." He pulled down his beanie further on his head and sipped up his cold higher. "Just do it already. That way we can go back home." I nodded. I couldn't believe myself. I actually nodded. Despite all my internal senses going haywire, there was no turning back now. They promised me they wouldn't be too far away, that they would be near the creek at the west entrance of the woods, about 100 meters away from the clearing that I was in. Then they left me alone. Alone in the dark, alone out here, along with who knows what. I cursed myself trying to control my breathing. My heart was hammering in my chest. I let out a sigh, watching as my breath steamed the cold air in front of my face. I just had to make it for an hour. 1 hour. I walk to the boulder and lean against it and wait and wait. And that's where I am right now, still waiting. I actually shouldn't be here. I know I shouldn't. I let out another sigh, taking out my phone, squinting at the sudden bright light of the display. I checked the time, 12:42, just 18 minutes. Time was going slow. That's when a loud noise interrupted me from my self-pity and thoughts. The sound of a twig snapping. Someone was moving near me. My eyes were wide, looking around, trying to pierce the inky blackness. My natural night vision couldn't see. I tried to swallow, but my mouth was too dry. The noise came again, this time from behind me. I spun around, trying to desperately squint through the darkness. I turned on my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shined it through the trees. It was Archie and Sam. I knew it. They were most likely trying to prank me, trying to make me scream so they could tell other friends that Jake was scared of the dark and was such a coward. My fist clenched tighter around my phone. "Archie, Sam, I know it's you," I called out. That's when the noise came from my left. I whipped around and saw it. It was a deer. It was close, like 2 meters away from me. I could see its coarse fur and its twisting antlers and its eyes. Its eyes were wrong. I stepped backwards. Those eyes, they had me transfixed. I couldn't stop staring into them. That's when the deer started to move, jerky movements towards me. I was frozen in shock. I heard a faint noise in the distance, some high-pitched noise, and I was left wondering if I had imagined it. The deer kept moving towards me, menacing, terrifying. I was paralyzed in fear. My body wanted to move, but I couldn't. All I could do was stand there as the deer kept stalking towards me, slowly. It wasn't a deer. It was obvious. The eyes, the way it was moving, the way it held its posture, the way it was standing. It was clear that this was something else. What it was, I'm not sure, but I know it wasn't a deer for sure. Something was inside of it, wearing it, testing it out and seeing how it worked. That's when my body came to life. I had control of it, breaking free from its stare. That's when I turned and ran. I wasn't even paying attention to where I was running, just anywhere from that thing. I looked behind me. It wasn't following me. It just kept standing in the clearing, watching me. I turned back to look where I was going, but it was too late. I tripped over a log. I think my knees were in pain. My left elbow scraped. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain, and looked behind me. The woods were silent. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat and my heavy breathing. I heard footsteps, pounding footsteps coming towards me. That's when Sam bursted through the foliage. He couldn't speak. His chest was heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His hair and face were slick with sweat, and he had lost his beanie on the run. It got him. It freaking got Archie, he was able to say. He noticed that I was confused. The deer, the fucking deer. He broke down. I realized this was the first time that I had seen him cry. When I turned back, there were bones on the floor. The deer had gone. And then there was this thing. The fucking ugly-ass creature. It was horrible, dude. I couldn't do anything but stay crouched where I was, shocked. He then continued. It took his skin, like in the horror movies. Skinwalkers. They take the skins of their victims. And then more of those fucking deer showed up. Like about 5 of them, dude. 5 of them next to the thing wearing Sam's skin. I ran like hell. We should have never fucking came here. His tears kept coming. I was breathing heavy from where I ran as well. And that's when I told him. I also saw a deer. It was in the clearing. I ran because it just didn't seem right. That's when we saw a deer walking towards us. Its eyes were red. "Let's go," I said, leaping to my feet and grabbing Sam by the arm, dragging him with me. At this point, I could actually hear the deer following us behind. A loud crunch, and I knew that if I looked back now, it wouldn't be a deer following us. It would be one of those creatures that Sam had described. I just kept running and running. Then, we got lost. Branches whipped in our face. If one of us tripped, the other was simply going to keep going, dragging the other along until they got their pace back. But we got split up, not even sure how. I think there was a tree, and Sam was going around the left of it, and I happened to go to the right of it. I let go of his arm for a second. I think after we passed the tree, he wasn't there no more. I had lost them. I kept running until I couldn't run anymore. I came to a stop, leaned against a tree trunk, trying to catch my breath back. I took a step, and that's when I heard some brittle sounds crunching from underneath my shoe. I stepped back and looked down at what I had stepped on. There was something white on the floor. I took my phone out and shined its flashlight on the floor. There were bones on the floor, shattered by me stepping on them. I shined the light around. There was a skull near the bushes. At this point, I wanted to vomit. This must be all that's left of my friend Archie. I sank to my knees and started to sob. Uncontrollably, I then fell onto my backside, but I felt something under me. I sat up and picked it up. It was Sam's beanie. Then, everything clicked. I spun around. And of course, there was Sam, walking towards me. But it wasn't Sam. Of course it wasn't. His eyes were red, and that smile, it wasn't right. It was wearing Sam's skin, though. That's when Sam got close to me, and his grin got whiter. And he then said, "I dare you to run. Go on, double dare." I'm an 18-year-old from California. Last year in 2023, I decided to go on a solo one-night camping trip on a secluded trail. My plan was to go early and hike all day through beautiful forested mountains until I went off trail and set up camp for the night. The next day I would finish the hike and get picked up by my family where the trail would end on a dirt road. I had been on this trail before with my father and knew it very well. It's not really marked on the map, which is why I like hiking it. Normally, I wouldn't go by myself camping out in the woods, but I was feeling old enough and brave enough to attempt it. I also knew that the chances of seeing somebody else was close to zero, as I hadn't seen a single other person hiking it before, even in daytime. I chose this trail because I wanted to camp out into this region, but camping there isn't allowed by the Park Service. So by choosing this trail, there was a little chance that I got caught and would get busted by some other hikers. And for this reason, I chose not to start a fire and instead used a propane cooker. My dad dropped me off at the trailhead. I was ready. I had 3 knives on me, a whistle for mountain lions, and a lot of experience in the area. I enjoyed myself until I came to my predetermined camp spot off the trail. I set up my tent, had dinner over my stove, and tucked in for bed. I woke up in the middle of the night. Well, suddenly. At first I didn't hear anything and thought I woke up randomly. I waited a few moments, laying up with my eyes open. Then I heard a twig break not far from my tent. I didn't panic immediately, as I thought it could be a deer or a raccoon. I was going to make a noise to scare it off, but before I did, I heard 2 steps pressing on the pine needles and twigs. My heart began racing as it sounded like a human walking. Keep in mind, I am off the trail in a place where I hadn't seen anybody before. I reached over to my side where I had my buck knife. I heard the walking come towards my tent, but not directly. Then it stopped. I was terrified, but I kept silent. Even if I wanted to yell, I felt like I couldn't. Then I heard what only confirmed my fears. The thing outside my tent began to hum. There was no doubt it was a person. I grabbed my knife, knowing that was all I had to defend myself. The humming continued, but I stayed completely silent, hoping that they would just leave. I kept going for what felt like minutes until the person stopped and began walking away from my tent. I then heard scratching on one of the trees near my campsite before I heard them dash away, creating a huge commotion of grass, pine needles, and branches breaking. Needless to say, I didn't fall asleep after that, and I stayed up all night, clutching my knife. In the morning, when the sun had come up, I didn't hear anything else. I got up and quickly began packing my things to make a mad dash for the end of the trail. At this point, I was running, just looking back. I ended up at the dirt road by noon, and I called my family to pick me up. They did, and I told them the whole story. To this day, I haven't gone back on that trail, and I made the difficult choice not to inform the authorities, as I couldn't pin anyone to a crime, and it would mean that I would have to admit that I illegally camped in that area. I recently decided to head back to the area with my father on a shorter hike to show him we saw trash and evidence of a person living out in those woods, which was now abandoned. It was creepy because it really wasn't far from where I was at the first time, meaning that I most likely was never alone when I camped there. I swear, I'm not scared of something supernatural coming out from me in the woods. I'm more scared of humans. Growing up on the rest, my uncle once told me that we need to kill our pets right away if they ever spoke, that they curse you if you don't. Have any of you ever heard this or something along those lines? I don't hear this quite often, and not just with your own pets, more like any animal that ends up talking, a speaking animal. Well, I have something to share, but before you even say anything, I want to say this is the reason why we don't speak to outsiders about certain things, even to other indigenous people belonging to different tribes. Why? Because there's still so much to learn, and we shouldn't judge another culture when we don't understand their ways yet. So many people don't even know one word of their own people's language, culture, or beliefs, yet they want to talk about one's own teachings. But anyways, that's a story for a different day. This is why in my tribe, we're familiar with the following teaching. Always be careful with what you say, because a little bird can take your own words to town. I'm going to stay anonymous, and I'll say what tribe or where I'm from, because you know how people can be. So I grew up on the rest. Well, mainly me. I'm the only child. Over the summers, at least. I guess I didn't really grow up on the rest. But over the summers, my parents would drop me off with my cousins, with my uncle and auntie, and I would stay with them for a few months. This would happen every summer. They had a small trailer home out in the open, but all around us was nothing but trees and brush. It wasn't so bad. You would often hear the birds, the different critters. Once the sun started going down, it always got quiet out there. the kind of quiet that makes you just want to stay inside. It was strange out there as well. Something strange would happen every summer that I went. I think the land itself was strange or something. Everything was strange up there. It was loud during the day, quiet at night. So the yard was full of patches of grass missing here and there, with everything else consisting of dirt. A few old cars parked out front that didn't run no more, that my uncle always kept. Somehow he always promised to work on them, but they had been there so long that they became part of the place. I saw them every summer, and I would ask him about them, and he always said he was in the process of restoring them. And a few yards in front there was a big pole that my uncle would hang certain banners, flags or other things. They also had a small shed that was out in the back. But we didn't go there much unless we had to, and no, this isn't a story about a haunted shed. Anyways, this one summer, the last summer there, I was outside playing with my cousins. I was a bit older than them, even though I was a teenager. When out of nowhere this random dog shows up. I swear, it happened out of nowhere. But the thing looked off from the start. Its mouth was long and wide. At least it looked like it was always smiling. I assumed it was a different dog breed that I hadn't seen. But the way it smiled, it seemed really creepy. Something about it didn't sit right with me. But when my uncle saw it, the dog quickly ran to him and started playing. I guess the poor dog hadn't seen anybody in so long. Out there, stray dogs were common. Sometimes dogs wandered off from other homes around the rest, and eventually the dogs found themselves into someone's home. So of course my uncle took him in, just like everything else in this property. And well, for a while, the dog just stayed around, sleeping outside, laying down in the shade, and my uncle and aunt would sometimes feed it. It was real friendly, always following us when we walked around outside. As much as I said it was creepy, we did start getting along. But just as we started, everything went south, as you all like to say. One evening was taking out the trash. It wasn't fully dark yet, but it was starting to. I stepped outside through the front, but the dumpster for the trash was in the back of the trailer, so I had to walk around. As I was walking, I swear I heard someone singing coming from the back. Now remember I told you that at night everything got quiet? That was the strange part. Nowadays you hear crickets chirping and different critters at night, but over here, literally everything got quiet, so when I heard it, startled me. It sounded like a woman's voice, soft, almost like somebody was humming. I thought that maybe it was my auntie, but as I hit the corner of the trailer to get to the back, the humming stopped and I didn't see anybody. Well, all right, maybe it was her and she went through the opposite side. As I threw the trash in, I turned around. All I saw was that damn dog sitting there, staring at me. It wasn't wagging its tail or moving. It was literally just sitting there, looking at me. It was sitting down the way I came, so fuck that. I left it alone and went back inside, but through the opposite side. Good thing this dog was an outdoor dog at this point. So that night, you might guess what happened next. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that humming sound, except this time it was by my window. At first I thought it was just the wind. Not sure if you have ever left the window a bit cracked or something, but it sounds like a whistle when air is finding its way through. But then I really listened, and it changed from what sounded like humming to like whimpering, like somebody was crying. Eventually it stopped, and I guess I fell asleep because the next day I told my auntie about it, and it turns out they also ended up hearing it. Everyone was kind of uneasy, which made it worse because if your family gets quiet about something like that, you know it's not good. And mind you, we were supposed to have a ceremony the next day, so that morning I was helping my auntie cook breakfast. My uncle and cousins were outside setting up the tent in the back where the ceremony was going to be conducted. I figured I would take them some coffee or see if they need anything. As I stepped outside, I glanced up at the post that I told you about that was in front, just out of habit, and that's when I saw it. A big-ass owl sitting right up there staring down at me. My stomach dropped. Everyone knows what that means, especially around here. I froze for a second, then picked up some rocks and started throwing them at it. And that's when I noticed it had an earring hanging off its ear. I ran back inside and told my auntie what I saw. That's when she asked me where everyone else was at, and I said they're in the back right now. So she basically almost dragged me outside with her. When we stepped out, it was still there. So we went to the back of the trailer where my uncle was at. My auntie told my uncle what was going on, and just like that, my uncle grabbed a nearby stick or a branch or something, and then he ran around to the front swinging and shouting, "You don't belong here. I know what you are," and not to mention he was shouting all of this in our native language. That's when the dog also came from the back, running, barking, and growling towards it. And then the owl finally took off. But as it did, it started to let out this low, ugly cackle. It sounded like it was laughing, mocking us. My uncle stood quiet for a moment, still keeping his eyes out there. Then he turned to us, and I won't forget what he said. From now on, we're going to keep our eyes open. Things like that don't just show up for no reason. He looked over at my auntie and gave her a slight nod, and then he told her to get everything ready. He then said, "Once we're done setting up the tent in the back, we are going to cleanse." Nothing else happened after that. But that night, everything changed. I remember laying there, staring at the ceiling, listening as something had woken me up again. At first it was quiet. Then, I swear I heard some humming again. Maybe it was singing. Soft, almost far away. It sounded like someone was whispering, just outside. I didn't even dare to look outside the window. Fuck, at this point I turned around instead. I mean, they always tell you not to pay attention to these things, right? Don't acknowledge it. Anything that you see or hear. And if you do see or hear something, so best believe that's exactly what I did. This is why I will never understand people who say, in the movies, "Let's go investigate what that noise was." You know, in the scary movies. I can't remember what happened, but I ended up falling back asleep. The next morning, I woke up to loud voices outside, a whole commotion going on. I got up and looked down. And it was my auntie. She was yelling at my uncle. She was almost in tears, I could tell. But she kept telling him, "We need to get rid of that dog. I saw it last night. It was outside our window." But it wasn't even right. It was smiling. The dog was sitting there a few feet away, staring at them, calm, almost like it knew what was being said, just watching. My uncle didn't say anything. He was just standing there quiet. Then he finally said, "All right." Without saying anything else, he ended up grabbing the dog, put it into the truck, and drove off. That morning, while helping with breakfast, my uncle came back. When he walked in, he told me and my cousins that Shelley was no longer going to be around. And that's that. We didn't even say anything back. And yes, we had named the dog by now. Later that afternoon, while getting everything ready for the ceremony that was going to be done, we were all outside and out of nowhere, far out in the distance, with Shelley. One of my younger cousins was like, "Hey, Shelley is back." When my uncle heard him say this, his face completely changed. Not a fear. I could see he was pissed off. The dog was sitting out there, far in the distance, just sitting. My uncle went up to it, grabbed it, put it into the truck, and told us that he would be right back to finish prepping everything. We didn't even say anything. Whenever things like this happen out here, my auntie always told us not to talk about these things, especially as they're happening. I remember it wasn't even like 10 minutes when we heard him pulling up into the yard again. I remember he didn't say anything but ran inside. We all went inside with him, nosy-ass kids, of course. As we walked in, I remember him telling my auntie. The dog started laughing at me, so I ended up slitting its throat. We were shocked. Well, not me. One of my cousins let out a gasp, and my uncle told us to mind our business and get back to work. He closed the door and basically locked us outside. We were outside until my uncle came out and he told us to come back in. He didn't say anything about the dog or nothing. I just didn't like how sometimes things don't get talked about. But hey, again, keep your mouth shut, right? We figured that if we needed to know, they would tell us. Later that night, my uncle told all of us to go change and get ready for the ceremony as we all got together in the living room. My uncle had sent my cousins outside to go start a fire when suddenly they came running back inside. One of my cousins' face was pale. He said that Shelley was back standing right outside the tent. We all went to look through one of the windows, and sure enough, there it was. That same dog. That's when my uncle told us not to come outside, that he would be right back. He grabbed his gun and went outside. We saw him through the window. He walked up to the dog as the dog simply sat there. My uncle aimed his gun right at the dog's head. He waited about 5 to 10 seconds, and then he shot it. He then covered the eyes of the dog with a cloth or something, but he left it out there. He came back inside and told all of us to come with him. That's when he told all of us in front of the dog, "This was no dog. This is bad medicine. It wore the skin of one, but it wasn't one." He then said he was going to take it far away from here, that he was going to go burn the body, then bury the remains with cedar or something to say a few prayers, because when something like this happens, it carries bad energy. It will stick around. However, What I won't forget before he left was when he told all of us, "If an animal ever speaks to you, you kill it." That's exactly what I did with this wannabe dog here. I never did find out what was going on out there. A bunch of other creepy things happened that I won't ever tell you about, simply because you might call me crazy or you might just not believe me. Even when I tell other indigenous people about this, some of them just don't believe it. That was the last summer I went. I didn't go back. My parents actually didn't let me go again. I guess because of what I told them what was going on, I still kept in touch with them. However, the subject, the things that happened, never get brought up. And now we all kinda went separate ways, especially when me and my family moved down south. I do wonder what was going on, which is why I'm sharing this with you. Do y'all have any idea what my uncle and his family were dealing with? Please let me know if you or somebody else, maybe somebody in your own family, has ever gone through something like this. Thanks for listening. Out here on the res, being safe doesn't just come from locking your doors. It comes from who you let into your home. You see, something that we teach out here on the res is that spirits, especially dark ones or other things, they can attach themselves to people who are walking down a road that they shouldn't be or doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. And if you're not careful, if you spend too much time around somebody who's doing those things, whatever is following them might just start following you. This happened during my senior year of high school. My best friend was kicked out of her home and didn't have anywhere to go, so my parents let her live with us. I had a smaller bed, so she had to sleep in the same bedroom with my sister that was next to mine. Everything was good for a while until I heard the noises from my closet one night, and this always happened during the night when we were all asleep. The first few nights, it sounded as if a mouse was digging in the closet. I would get up, turn on the light, open the closet door, and there was nothing. My dad set some mouse traps in the closet thinking we would catch the little thing. Nothing was ever called. Just about a week or so later, the noise grew louder, but this time it sounded like a human was digging through stuff in the closet. This is what started to freak me out. I got up, did the same thing, turned on the light, opened the closet, and nothing. Nothing out of place. I do remember that an elder once told me that if you have something that belongs to somebody who has passed on that was not gifted to you, they could come back and look for it. So I looked through my closet and everything was mine, so I know it couldn't be that. This went on for a couple of nights until I couldn't take it. I told my dad. He didn't really believe me at first. He still thought it was a mouse. I did try telling him that the noise was way too loud for a mouse to be making, so we swapped beds for a night. He slept in my room, and I ended up sleeping with my mom. It was the first time I slept good in a while. The next morning, my dad comes rolling out of my room looking sleep-deprived. He finally believed me, so he ended up smudging the whole house. Everything was good for a few weeks. Until one night, I was asleep and whatever it was back, and it was even more loud. It freaked me out. I screamed for my dad. He came running in as soon as he opened the door. The noise stopped, so we opened the closet. Same as always. Nothing was misplaced. He ended up visiting one of his spiritual friends that ended up telling him that I had to tell the unwanted spirit that it was not welcome in my room and that it needed to leave. Well, it came back again. At this point, I was fed up, almost angry. I was a teenager who was sleep-deprived and so sick of it that I didn't even want to talk to it. So I yelled at it to leave my fucking room and be gone. That was the worst thing that I could have done at that time. Whatever it was, threw my closet door open and started knocking all around my room, circling with the knocks over and over. I couldn't see a shadow or anything. I just heard the loud knocks. I screamed. My dad came. Once again, when he opened the door, it stopped. He ended up smudging again. Everything was good for a while, until one night, I was sleeping. I would always keep the bathroom light on. My room was right next to it, so I could have some light shining into my room from underneath the door. Well, before this night, my dad would walk through the house and would walk to my room to check on me. It was always on random nights, and I would hear his footsteps coming whenever he would do it. Well, this night, I thought I heard my dad walking through the house. I could hear the footsteps coming closer to my room. I looked at the foot of the door and I saw a shadow, as if it was my dad at the door, ready to open it. But he didn't open the door. The door handle just jiggled. The footsteps then moved into the bathroom, and then whatever it was started scratching at the wall, where I was on the other side of it. That's where I fucking screamed. My dad came running in. and nothing was there. Nothing else happened after that. But the next day, my dad went back to his friend. He gave him something to smudge with. I don't remember exactly what it was. Then he also had somebody bless the inside and outside of the house. Things were good. My friend reconciled with her mom and she moved back home. I didn't have anything else happen after that. It was gone. I was finally able to have some sleep. We did end up visiting my dad's friend. He said that he believes the dark spirit had attached itself to my friend because of the life that she lives. She's had a rough upbringing and has done some negative things to herself. He believes that the spirit loves to feed off of negative things, and it tried to test me as well. He also said that they always try to lead somebody off the right path. It does creep me out whenever I tell this story. It's something that I'll never forget. I do wonder if it was going to end up doing something to me or if my friend continued to live with it. It still makes me shiver when I think about it. I do want to say that it never bothered my sister. As a matter of fact, she had no idea this was going on until I told her. I guess maybe it was trying to attach itself to me. Somehow, thank you for allowing me to share with you. Have a good night. So want to share this story to get some of your opinions. A while back, 9 to 10 years ago, I was staying down in the res at my grandma's house. At this time, a lot of my family was down, and some of you know how grandma's house is. There was a lot of people staying there. So there was nowhere for me to sleep, and I wasn't going to sleep on the ground with no blankets or pillow. So I called my mom and said if she could come get me. She answered, and of course me being a mama's boy, she came and picked me up. We were heading out, and out here on this rest, when you leave, you're heading out this curved road, then a straight path to the highway. So right before we get to the highway, there's this little building that we call the Tribal Affairs Building, and you can basically see the front and the back of this building. Well, in the back is where they keep this big-ass green dumpster. While me and my mom were driving by, we saw this furry-looking animal or dog or something digging in the trash. Let me remind you, those green dumpsters are pretty tall. I would say at least 5 or 6 feet off the ground. And whatever this thing was, it was just leaning on the dumpster digging through it. My first reaction was to believe it was some sort of crusty rest dog looking for food. Then my mom slowed down and we both were looking at it. As soon as she slowed down, I think I knew that we were looking at it. Next thing to happen, this dog-like thing peered up at us with 2 eyes that reflected off the headlights. And it had a dog face and was at least 3 feet taller than the dumpster. As soon as we saw that thing watching us drive by, we ended up screaming like hell. My mom ended up hauling ass onto the highway. This still gives me chills to this very day. So if anybody's seen a crusty tall rest dog running around, let me know. Friend told me that there was a black dog on her rest that would follow people walking down the road at night. She said that you had to tell the dog your intentions and to be honest with it, and only then would it leave you alone. But if you lied to this dog, something bad would happen to you. And she said that some people would have bad luck. The person could get sick, or another time that she told me that somebody got hit by a vehicle. Basically, something bad would happen to them. It freaked me out because it was just super creepy, and we know how the rest can have random dogs roaming around. She said that everyone would say to avoid any animals and strays at night. This whole subject came up because we were talking for a while now, and I asked her if she had any scary stories to share. I know every res is different. I know that animals can sometimes be seen as messengers, spirit guides, warnings, even bad omens, depending on the animal that you come across. The story didn't stick with me too much, even though at first it did creep me out. However, I remember that story because a few years later, one night on my rest, I was walking home. It was that time of year where it got dark early, and there was this part in the road where there's no streetlights and it gets really dark. I turned my head around because I could feel something behind me. You know that feeling like when someone is watching you, just like that. So I'll start looking behind me, and I'll start seeing this shadow of a small person, or at least what looked like a small person. I looked at it trying to figure out what I was looking at. It was also completely still, like it was trying to blend in, but then it started moving towards me. I could see the silhouette, the head, the body, arms and legs start walking. But fuck that, I wasn't having it. I started walking, hoping to get to the next streetlight, walking a bit faster and eventually started running because there was no way I'm going to die this young. I finally made it to a section where there was a street light, and when I did, I heard a dog that growled as it jumped out from the bushes on the side of the road. That's when 1,000 pins and needles just hit me. I started remembering my friend's story. And at this point, I'm not running. I'm walking now that I'm in the light again. Except this dog. It starts walking beside me. You know how sometimes a stray will follow you around, sniff around everywhere and get distracted with something, but as you walk it will continue? This dog wasn't like that. It actually started walking next to me. Except not only was it walking, I knew it was just staring at me dead in the eyes. Remembering my friend's story. I just told the dog without looking at it. I'm going home. I'm going home. I said a few times for it to be exact, and in my head I'm like, this can't be true. But fuck it, just to be on the safe side. I'm gonna say it after I said it the last time. It just kept staring at me. I didn't even look its way, but I knew it was staring at me. And right after that, it simply walked into the bushes. I kept walking and it was gone. Now here's the creepy part. I kept walking and not even a minute goes by and one of my cousins is driving down the street. I know because he stopped beside me and he invited me to go party with them. He was hanging out with his friends as well. I quickly said no. I'll be honest. I was in fear of that dog coming back. So I didn't want to take any chances. Maybe it was just a random dog, some random rest dog going down the road like they do. But the way it was acting, it felt off. I mean, not like I was staring at it, but I felt something wasn't right. And with everything that my friend told me, I wasn't about to take any chances. Maybe it was the tell me the truth dog. Maybe it wasn't, regardless. I was going to be honest, not lie, and I was going to get my ass home, 'cause that's what I said I was going to do. Remember, on the rest, don't test the spirits. Grandma always told me to never sleep with your feet hanging off your bed or even on cover, because something will grab you. I know we followed the rules on the rest that we're told growing up, especially the ones that I still sort of don't understand yet, the ones that many people seem to not know about, like the one about pregnant women shouldn't hold any child that's not theirs, or if you play with fire, you're going to wet the bed, or like when you enter someone's home. Well, hold on. You should always walk in a clockwise direction. It's the same way whenever you play board games, but the one about never sleeping with your feet hanging, or on cover. I saw her laugh when she said it. I thought she was joking, except she was serious, and even scolded me by telling me why. She said when she was younger, she was half asleep one night when she felt something like cold fingers wrap around her ankles. And before she could react, she was dragged off the couch onto the floor, all the way to the front door. She did attribute this to something bad going around the community at that time, something that had been disturbed. She said that when somebody in the community disturbs something, it walks around at night. Ever since then, well, for a few years after she told me that, I make sure to sleep with my feet covered and on the bed with me. I mean, who even sleeps with their feet hanging over the foot of the bed or couch, even if I am underneath the covers? Well, several years ago, I was at a house living with 2 roommates. I'll just say at this time, I wasn't doing good in life, and drinking and smoking was not helping. Those few friends around me were also not a good influence, but I'm just glad that I'm no longer around them, and I'm also walking a different road now. So I was laying down with my feet over the couch. Armrest, what do you call it? The side. And my feet were hanging off the side while scrolling on social media. The house we were staying in had 2 couches in the living room, and one of them my friend was asleep on, and I was on the other. My other friend had the bedroom because, well, it was his house. You know when you're laying down and blinded by the phone's light, everything around you can look sort of pitch black. Well, out of nowhere, felt like a cat walking under my feet. I didn't scream or do anything because I thought it was a cat or something. My friend, he had 2 cats in the house as well. He would always keep them in the room, but I assumed that he left the door open or something. And after a few minutes, it happened again. I remember I was watching a video on my phone, telling myself how these damn cats, if they don't leave. That's when I felt something. I felt something cold grab my ankles and let go of them quickly as well. With that, I quickly turned on the iPhone light and looked around. There was nothing. What was I supposed to do? The only reason my feet were hanging is because I didn't fit on the couch itself. It might sound crazy, and maybe I was trying to lie to myself that it wasn't anything scary. By telling myself that it was the cat trying to hang off my feet, I simply went back to my video, and nothing else happened after that. The next morning, I told my roommate, the one who owned the cats, that they had been messing with me all night. I remember I told him bro, you need to keep your cats out of the living room. They were messing with my feet while I was trying to sleep. And he just looked at me confused. Then he said, what are you talking about? I let them outside at night. They were never locked up. I stared at him, also remembering my grandma's story. I don't have an explanation for this. Could it have been something? Or maybe even my friend playing a prank. But I think I would have seen him or heard something from then on. I never gone to sleep without a blanket over my feet. Has anyone else had their feet touched when hanging off the bed or the couch? Cover your feet at night, or something will grab you. God damn it, not again, screamed Ricky after opening the much-anticipated email. Pinche pendejo, he said even louder. Hijo de tu puta madre. He picked up his expensive mouse and threw it against the wall. Besame el pinche culo, puto. He slammed his fist down, shattering the tricked-out top-of-the-line gaming keyboard. Ricky continues to stare at the message, the words mocking him from his computer screen. The message was topped with a large header and white font that stood in contrast to the black background. Right there, the two hated words that said, "Story delete." Ricky is all too familiar with these words. In fact, he should be able to recite the entire message from memory by now. Your story has been deleted because it doesn't meet the quality standards. If you feel like it didn't meet the standards, please state your case on the appeal. Make sure you follow the instructions to the letter there, or your appeal will be automatically denied. Do not attempt to re-upload your story. If you upload again, you'll receive a one-day ban from editing as per the rules. Ricky loves scary stories. He comes from a culture rich in the history of the supernatural. The only thing he loves more than scary stories is writing scary stories. Sadly, there is one problem. How do I put this? Well, the truth of the matter is our friend Ricky here is, for lack of better words, a shitty writer. There's zero talent in this poor boy's head, and the same can be said about his imagination. His characters have no substance. His grammar is horrible. His plot developments are non-existent, and his word choices are, might I say, infantile. What is truly sad about this whole ordeal is that Ricky truly believes his stories are good. No, he thinks that they're great. The dark and sinister forces that inhabit the worlds that he creates are far more superior to anything seen in a movie or even found on the internet, or so he believes. His dark tales are capable of tapping into the pools of terror buried deep within our subconscious minds. That's what he expects his readers to find from every one of his works, whereas you and I would see it for what it really is. Some have even gone as far as to say that his stories are so bad. Looking at the words for too long will give you pink eye. One boy claimed that after being forced to listen from beginning to end, Ricky's story gave him a near infection. Ricky doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't like rejection, and he already has it in his head that they are not even reading his stories. He's convinced they don't even bother to give him the time of day and just delete them. Everything builds up and his cheeks turn red as he screams out loud. Why wouldn't they listen to me? They never even gave me a chance. He knows this to be true, especially in consideration of how they treat him and what they say about his stories. He reads every comment. Bad grammar. But I'm new to this site. Can you not just tell me what to fix or fix it yourself? A lot of misspelled words, but it's the way my character speaks. Very poorly written and awkward sentences. Well, English isn't my first language, so just give me a chance. This story is not creepy. What do you mean it's not creepy? There's a fucking witch in the story. How's that not scary? See, Ricky is a spoiled kid from a well-to-do family. His ungrateful heart has never been denied a single demand. There was nothing he could not have in his pampered life. With such a lifestyle, he also never had a dream or aspire for greater things. Despite its value, all the objects of his desire were carelessly tossed to the side or forgotten when interest was lost. They meant nothing to him. And eventually, Ricky turned that frustration outwards upon those who were weaker and less capable of standing up for themselves. For every insult, every slight, and every time he did not get what he wanted, he inflicted that rage back upon the innocent. But, tonight, that's all gonna change. That's why I've been sent. That is my charge from La Dama. Tonight I will reveal to him the stories of his people and enlighten him about where he comes from. I'll bring knowledge under cover of night and carry revelation on the tip of my tongue. With his last breath, he will learn this final lesson. "Thou shalt not suffer," the cries of a spoiled child. So when the boy lays his head upon his pillow and closes his eyes to sleep, it will be unaware of the small leather pouch tucked ever so carefully beneath them. It will call out to her, it will summon her, and she will come, she will drink. Even though her thirst for revenge can never be quenched, she will feed her hate, though its hunger can never be satisfied. But to understand the events that are going to come to pass, we must look to the past. Know this, the more days that go by, the more things stay the same. Long ago, the people of Mexico suffered from the deeds of corrupt man, and they had to suffer through the true rulers of the land, the cartels. While savages and brutality swept across the plains and darkened the skies like a cloud of locusts, a small village in the city of Mexico prospered, untouched by the evils of man. In those days, the villages were weak. They couldn't defend themselves against the powerful and corrupt men. In fact, with the sickness of government and town officials, lined their pockets with the sweat and blood of the poor. No justice or protection ever came for the people. Farmers' crops were plundered and destroyed. Workers were kept in constant poverty. Their sons would be taken against their will to replenish the numbers. It was the daughters of Mexico who suffered the most. Many mothers and fathers could only mourn before a single lit candle, for there was not a body to bury for the funeral. They would live their lives knowing what became of their beloved child. Too many shadowed graves sprinkled the countryside with the bones from unnamed girls. Among this violence, all but one village suffer. Those of questionable character and darkness in their hearts, they wouldn't enter the borders of this town, for its people were under the care and protection of a powerful curandera. Her name was known from afar, and her magic was strong. The evil men knew this to be true, and they would not risk her wrath upon them. This ate away at their egos, and soon they began to plot among themselves in secret and darkened rooms. They planned to get rid of this woman. Early one morning, the curandera awoke to the sound of a child's cry. It was not a cry of terror, but a cry of pain. She ran out of her small house to see a boy sitting on the dirt path that ran alongside her home. Next to him was an old bike. Hitched to one of the wheels was a weathered cart, carrying a large wooden box. He sat crying on the ground, clutching both his arm and leg. Even from a distance, she could see the two painful welts upon the boy's skin. The curandera knew what happened, and she took a glass jar of something from off her shelf. She went out to the boy and warmly said, "Pasa, mijo? What's the matter, little boy?" No answer came from the boy. A little irritated, she asked him, "De picar algo? There's something sting you. Fue una avispa o una hormiga? Was it a wasp or an ant?" Again the boy said nothing. The curandera was becoming annoyed. She looked carefully at the boy who was sitting silently before her. From the clothes that he wore, she knew he was the rich man's son, most likely the child of an elected official or a member of the town's elite. She then gently applied the medicine to the two painful stings. The skin was hot and bright red, surrounding a lump the size of a large grape. After she finished, the boy simply turned and jumped on his bike and pedaled away without a part. This anger of the curandera, and she made a mental note, in the very near future someone will need to teach this boy some manners and the importance of respecting his elders. Shortly thereafter, the curandera went about her day-to-day business and forgot about the rude little boy. That night, after the curandera had laid her head down to sleep, she woke up to a loud bang. Her door had been broken down by several large men. They tied her hands and gagged her mouth to prevent any chances that she might say it's been on them. They took her wand, the one that was made out of the sacred huaturco wood, and snapped it in two. They removed her saco de curacion, her medicine bag, from around her neck, leaving the poor woman completely defenseless now. The man dragged the woman before the town's clergy, who were the most corrupt of them all. They denied any opportunity to defend herself. The curandera was accused of witchcraft and blamed for this year's poor harvest. They said she was in league with the devil, and they proclaimed her to be a Bruja, so they sentenced her to death. Everyone cheered upon hearing the verdict. She looked across the crowd and mourned at what she saw, the faces she had known for so long. Those faces who came to her when they were sick, or needed healing, and their place were hateful and dark eyes, filled with the bloodlust of an angry mob. She stood on a platform next to a short, thin coffin that stood upright. The crowd shouted as they grew impatient. She closed her eyes and tried to center herself among the shouts of swears and insults. The curandera began to pray. She prayed to the Holy Mother for deliverance. She begged and pleaded to her for protection. She begged the Holy Mother with desperation, proclaiming all her good deeds that were done, and a righteous life that she lived. Only silence greeted the curandera. The crowd suddenly grew quiet and the curandera opened her eyes. She saw the crowd separate in the middle and make a path for her little boy. This familiar child rode an old bike and was pulling a cart with a box. He dismounted the bike and walked around to the rear, opened the box that sat upon the cart, and carefully removed the large burlap sack. He held the bag and quickly brought it and its contents to the clergyman. As the man of God took hold of the sack, the boy looked up at the woman, smiled, and disappeared into the sea of bodies within the mob. Still bound, she was marched to the edge of town. All the way, she was beaten by the people who followed along. She was brought before a freshly dug grave and shoved hard into the open coffin. She stared up at the men mocking her from above. Just as they were about to see the coffin shut, the clergyman held up his arch hand with the burlap sack. He flung the bag into the coffin and the men quickly knelt the lid closed. The man then picked up the coffin containing the curandera and he dropped it off into the dark hole. The sound of dirt covering the coffin was loud and thunderous. The curandera lay terrified in the pitch dark just before the light had gone out. She saw what had been tossed in there with her. At her feet lay the largest wasp nest. She felt hundreds of thin legs begin crawling over her body. They were exploring the dark prison as they searched for the one who dared to disturb them. Time slowed as the curandera waited for the first thing to strike her. Once again she prayed to the Blessed Mother for protection, and still there was only silence. Pain from the first sting exploded over her right cheek. The sharp stinger was stabbed into her flesh. It tore through the skin and went as deep as it could. The wasp then contracted, slightly pumping its venom into its victim. It pulled out its sharp tip and again jabbed the stinger back into her flesh, for the wasp can use their stingers over again, even if they have exhausted their venom. It would not stop piercing your skin. She started screaming in pain as she was stung again and again. It stung her eyes and crawled into her open mouth and stung her tongue. The insects then crawled down into her throat and into her ears. Venom filled her veins and her skin turned red as it swelled and burned. The poison saturated her blood, causing it to thicken and burn. The swelling cut off her breathing as she began to convulse. This actually angered them even more, and they started stabbing her more relentless. Blood trickled from every puncture. Not a single spot on her body was spared. The pain continued to grow. She was about to call out to the Virgin Mother. Then she stopped herself. Betrayal and abandonment hit her deeply, causing her more agony than any wasp could. Anger and hate consumed the woman. She knew what she had to do. She would call out to somebody else. She would call out to La Santa Muerte, the Holy Death. Santa Muerte, I call on to you. I offer myself to you. I deny the Holy Mother. I deny the Father. I deny the Son. Take me, and I will do thy bidding. The curandera lay motionless in the darkness, wheezing and gasping for air. Her stings upon her skin were stretched until it tore from the swelling. The swarm of insects continued to poke and jab with their long stingers. The buzzing of the wings was deafening. Then suddenly, all was silent. The scraping of long fingernails traveled down the side of the coffin. The curandera tried to open her eyes, but her face was too bloated. It mattered not. She had no sight, as the stingers had penetrated her eyelids and filled her eyes with venom. The scraping stopped, and the curandera heard the low and ancient voice of a woman speak. Mihija. Que te pica, what's the matter, my daughter? The crowd had dispersed when the ground began to shake. The man had lean ground were congratulating themselves and laughing when the ground opened up. Black thorns emerged from the soil where the curandera laid, and the dirt blackened. All was still for a moment, until a deep and non-human noise was heard from the sky. It called to its new disciple beneath the ground. The villager cowered when the low voice boomed from the cracks that spread out from the spot of the woman's unholy grave. I curse you. I curse your children. They will taste the venom that now flows in my veins. When I hear a child cry, I will come. I will come for your children. They will feel my sting. I will nest within a home made from their skin. I will use their bones for stirring my brew. I will quench my thirst with their tears. I will dance to a song made from a symphony of their screams. She let out one final scream of demonic rage. 3 days later, the boy who was held by the curandera disappeared without a trace. It was fate that brought them together. He had been tasked with finding a wasp nest. It was by chance that 2 of them escaped and stung the boy near the curandera's home. She had shown him mercy, and he had repaid her with rudeness and betrayal. An empty bed was all they found except for the small pouch hidden underneath his pillow. Within it they found it had only a piece of paper, ash, and a lock of hair cut from a boy's head. She still keeps a part of him on her at all times, even to this very day. As time went by, more and more of the children disappeared. Eventually, like the righteous curandera, the little village died a slow and painful death. The people in that area still speak of this dark Bruja. It is told that when the days are shortened and the nights grow cold, the children must be especially good and obedient, for if a child is spoiled and shows no respect, La Bruja will find you. They say she is dressed all in black. She can fly long distances and climb up a wall. She will tap on the window and tempt the child to let her in. Her nails will click and tap on the window pane until the child hears her voice from the darkness. So that's the story of La Bruja. She is my lady, and I serve her well. I find those children who are spoiled and rotten. I find the ones most deserving of the fate that my lady brings. And who am I? Well, let me just say that I am someone who is familiar with matters such as these, but that's a story for another time. I will tell you this. I am not an angel or a demon. La Bruja has no mercy. She holds dark and powerful magic from a source of hatred and rage. So listen to my words, little boy or little girl. Do what you're told, beyond your best behavior. You don't want to end up like Ricky here. There will come a night when you will hear tapping at your window as the buzzing of 1,000 wings fill your ears. You will hear the low voice of a woman asking, "Que te pica, mi hijo? What's the matter, my child?" On the res, skinwalkers aren't the only things, people, that you should fear when you're driving at night. But those aren't the only things that walk the road after dark. On my res, there's some other things people don't talk about as much. For good reason too, and that's the spirits that haven't moved on. When someone leaves this world suddenly, or in a different type of way, their spirit can become trapped, caught between here and the next place. Sometimes they don't even know it. That's why we don't say their names, why we don't keep their stuff, why we don't call them back. People will put flowers and even build a memorial or something where someone has passed away, hoping to honor them, especially the younger generation. Maybe I'm telling my age here, but I was taught by the elders in my community that the land where something happened never truly lets go of what happened there. Not everyone agrees with putting up memorials. Some say they only remind the spirits of where they died, keeping them close to that spot instead of letting them go. Some of these places hold on to the energy of that person. People will visit, pray, and leave things behind, which will cause the spirit of that person connected to that spot to stick around, you can say. Starting to this more in the younger generation coming up. I'm not here to argue or convince you of anything, but if we believe in not keeping their stuff, not saying their name for a reason, why do people build memorials for them when they have passed on? I say this because I know different tribes have slightly variations when it comes to these things, and if I was you, I would consult some of the elders in your tribal community. Whether you believe it or not, I know one thing is for sure. The roads at night are never empty, even if you don't see someone. So what I'm going to share with you is not about the infamous skinwalkers. It's about something else that you can stumble upon while driving at night. This comes from one of my friends, one of my former co-workers with the Oglala Sioux Tribal Department of Public Safety, back when I worked as a tribal prosecutor. I can't remember the exact year it happened, but there was a tragic car crash about 1/4 of a mile west of Kyle, South Dakota, on Highway 2. A young lady was coming into Kyle from the west when she lost control of her car. This happened due to a dip in the road. Vehicle traveled from the westbound lane and into the eastbound lane. Her vehicle then rolled. The young lady died on scene. A memorial sign was put at the site of the accident, also encouraging people to wear their seatbelts. Now, this is a true story with nothing but true events. So I'm not going to say her name, and I'm also going to talk about this in the most respectful way that I can. If you're familiar with the location that I'm describing here, you might actually know who the young lady was. Nothing new. Car accidents on the rest where someone dies happen so much. It's so sad. What is different is that she was young. She wasn't impaired in any sort of way. It was simply a freak accident. You can drive into Kiowa every day and you will drive over the same dip in the road. You'll even feel the car move up and down as you pass over it. You go through it so often that your mind simply ignores it when you drive over them. and she wasn't drinking and the roads were not frozen or anything. Kiowa, Ohio is a small town located in the middle of the res. It has an elementary school, high school, 2 stores, tribal housing clusters. The tribal court for the east side of the res is here. The police department, the juvenile detention center, and the jail for adults. There's even a clinic with housing for the medical staff. So, everyone knows everyone, literally. So my friend, I'm going to call him John, was on patrol for the midnight shift. John had graduated from the Indian Police Academy a couple of years before. He was a really good officer. One time at night, over coffee, John told me about a crazy experience he had while he was working patrol. As an officer, he had seen his fair share of strange things. But this story, he told me it was one of the scariest moments of his life. It was a slow night. There was only so many times an officer could patrol the town of Kyle when it's quiet, like it was this night. You could patrol the housing and the rest of the town in 10 minutes and still have about 4 minutes left, so you can imagine how big the town is. Was hoping for that radio call asking for assistance from somebody else, maybe from Alan, so he would have something to do for the rest of his shift. However, that call never came. He returned, back to the police department. John went to use the bathroom, checked on the midnight shift corrections officer, and even went to go visit the radio room. John said he grabbed some coffee and went out on patrol. He told the radio that he was on patrol again for the night. He drove through the housing, around the school, and back up towards the clinic. Somewhere along the way, he said he decided to go up the hill. And the hill is exactly what that is, a hill that's overlooking Kyle. The top of the hill is where lots of people go and park their cars. People go up there to have lunch, visit, to watch the stars at night, or during the community powwow. It's a good place to sit and listen to the drums as well. Everyone in Kyle, at one time or another, has gone and sat at the hill for whatever reason. I thought many times during lunch when I was at work myself. So John said that he drove his unit following the dirt road that was made by all the cars that came to the hill. John drove in about 300 yards and then reversed the unit and parked. He pulled out his report forms and began to filling them out for the evening, building checks and security checks for community members who weren't home for a few days. Nothing is more tedious than filling out those forms. John was making a dent on the evening patrol forms, keeping one ear open to the radio traffic while riding. He said it looked like it was quiet all over the east side of the rest. There was little radio traffic. No traffic was a good sign, and that meant that he could go home right when his shift was going to be over. All he was going to have to do is inform the day shift of how much gas was left in the unit. Talk to the lieutenant about the midnight shift if there was anything to report to him. John turned the radio down and then he turned on the car radio. Listening to the music while he was writing, the overhead ticket light lit up the inside of the unit. But since it was a white light, he lost his night vision due to the feeling out of reports. He was there for about 45 minutes, checking in with communications while writing his reports. He was about 4 reports away from finishing when he started to get this strange feeling. He said it was a feeling like somebody was watching him. John looked up. He looked at the rearview mirror. The white ticket light made it hard to see through the cage to the trunk area. He then turned off the light, but 45 minutes of white light ruined his vision. He couldn't see anything directly behind him, but when he looked in the driver's side mirror, he said he saw somewhat like long hair flowing in the wind at the back of the Expedition. He was trying to see behind him to get a better view of what he saw, but he couldn't see anything through the window in the back, so he looked in the rearview mirror and still couldn't see anything. He then rolled down his window, and when he did, that's when he noticed that there wasn't even wind at all. That's when John checked his driver's side mirror and he saw a figure at the back of the unit peeking at him from the back. He said the figure was a female. Her long hair was flowing. She was staring at him through the driver's side mirror. He was watching her as she stared back at him, and then she slowly moved her head back behind the unit. That's when John stepped on the brakes. The brake lights lit up the back of the Expedition, but there was nobody in the red brake lights. He then looked up in the rearview mirror, but he couldn't see anything. He then looked in the side mirror again. She was peeking around at him again. Her hair was flowing like if there was wind. At this point, John said that his eyes were more adjusted, and that's when he recognized her. The hair on his arm stood up and he got on the radio and put the Expedition in gear, stepped on the gas and hauled ass out of there. John said he drove down to the police department, drove straight into the Saudi port of the jail. He jumped down and went inside the booking area. The corrections officer said that he could see that John was shaking up by the look on his face. John then called dispatch on the landline and he asked them to send another officer to the police department. The tone of his voice made the dispatcher wonder what happened. It took about 30 minutes for the other officer to arrive. Meanwhile, was standing outside the Savvy port, and the corrections officer had also come to try to calm him down. When the other officer arrived, he was asking John what happened. John said that he took a deep breath and told his story of what happened on the hill to him. John said that the woman looking at him was the young lady that had passed away in the car accident. The other officer knew from the look on his face and sound of his voice that something happened. He suggested that they go back up there to investigate just to make sure it wasn't someone pulling a prank, but John refused. After a few minutes, the correction officer went back into the jail, and a few minutes later he came back out, and as he did, he yelled out at John and the other officer to come and look. When both John and the other officer walked back into the Savvy port, he pointed to the back of the expedition, and the back window and corner of the unit were handprints. The hand prints matched up exactly how someone's hands would look if they were behind the unit and peeking around from behind it. The officers and the corrections officer just stared at the handprints. John said that he reached out. The prints were fresh. No smudging, no streaks, just perfect impressions of fingers and palms. It made his stomach drop. That's when the other officer finally said, "Damn, you really saw her." The corrections officer, a man who had been working at the jail forever, shook his head. He told John to go see an elder. He told him that he has to get himself clean, or whatever he saw at the hill might actually follow him back home. The next day word spread fast. Other officers started sharing their own stories, strange sounds on that hill. Some of them said that they'd seen shadows moving in the mirrors, even radio static whenever they drove past a memorial site. Some even said they had this strange feeling every time they patrolled near the dip in the road where the accident happened. It wasn't long before the community elders stepped in after hearing what happened to John. They gathered the family of the young woman and explained what needed to be done. The family, though grieving, understood. Family and friends only wanted to honor her in a special way, but in doing so, they might have caused something. The elders advised that the memorial be taken down, that prayers be made, and that a proper ceremony be held to guide her home, if it truly is her. A few days later, it was done. The memorial was removed. Afterward, all the strange occurrences stopped. No more strange feelings from the officers whenever they would go over the crash site. John never went back to the hill at night. He said he has seen enough. My buddy John is set to retire this year. This happened a while back. And so that whenever you're driving down an old country road, a road on the rest or the highway, and you see a cross or some kind of memorial around, keep your eyes open. You just never know what might be watching you back when you look at your mirrors at night while driving.